This week, I woke up to a terrifying sound at 5 o'clock in the morning. A helicopter hovering over my house. Now, many times this happens as a result of an incident on a highway, road closures, or even construction. And that news helicopter is now reporting of how the morning drive is filled with delays and traffic. This happened more than once for me, and so immediately my blood starts pumping and the adrenaline kicks in, and I'm in such a rush out the door that I forget I'm still in my pajamas. And then it hits me. It's Wednesday, and I have no classes to teach on campus. But at this point, my blood pressure is so high that it would probably take a bear tranquilizer to get me to sleep again. Well, alright. Let's at least go and film our weekly YouTube video. I want to show you a little bit more of the waterfront here in Brooklyn. This time we will walk through two neighborhoods, Williamsburg and Greenpoint. And this here is the general path I took. Now the reason for this video is because I was in Greenpoint recording some places for the future. Since, well, I grew up here and at one point I would like to share my story and give you a little bit of an insight into who I am. But while I was doing so, I came across two ideas. One of which I will share shortly, and the other one, well, this video. The neighborhoods have changed drastically in the last 20-25 years. I mean, I was just a kid, so I did not look at the surroundings the way I do today, but I still remember many things, and certainly I will share some of this with you. But for a few years, many of the buildings, as you see here, were these older 6-8 family buildings which today are being replaced by modern homes. And many places, especially by the waterfront, were industrial zones with factories and warehouses, which today are replaced by modern buildings and parks. However, walking through the neighborhoods, you can still see older buildings which are now sort of hiding in the midst of modern or renovated structures, and they remind of how these neighborhoods used to look like. Plus, I have found a secret here in Williamsburg. Check this out. Ha! Who knew this is that simple? See, we New Yorkers find a shortcut for everything. I'm just surprised there is no pizza place next to it. Now that would make it perfect. Okay. So let's start in Williamsburg by the Williamsburg Bridge and then make our way to Greenpoint along the waterfront. There is a small park at the bottom of the bridge with this cool statue of George Washington at Valley Forge. The statue was dedicated in 1906, so just 3 years after the Williamsburg Bridge opened. Valley Forge is in Pennsylvania, not that far away from the city of Philadelphia. It's where George Washington encamped with his Continental Army really in the winter and spring of 1777 and 1778. I will leave this as a topic for another video, however, most people do not realize how instrumental George Washington was to the American Revolution. Many times he was really the glue that held the men and army together. And in fact, he was so popular and loved that he probably could have become the new king of the colonies, and most would probably love the idea. However, he stepped down from that power. An act which even made King George III of Britain admire his character even more. Here we have Williamsburg Bridge, which opened in 1903, well, actually in December of 1903. And when it did, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world, until 1924, when the Bear Mountain Bridge opened, which I did show in my previous video as we traveled to Bear Mountain in New York. Its chief engineer was Mr. Buck, and work began in 1896, which means it took about 7 years to complete it. Now, you just know I will have to walk over it to Manhattan side in order to show it to you. When I was walking onto the bridge, I realized that I never actually walked across it. I think when I was younger, I biked over it once or twice, and I took it hundreds of times with my car to the point I can tell you all the bumps and cracks, but I never actually walked over it. Therefore, another thing that starting this channel on YouTube forced me to do, which I have not done yet, and that's a good thing. I'm happy about it. I immediately noticed that many people were taking the bridge to get to work in Manhattan, and I'm saying this based on how they were dressed. But that's one of the reasons why Williamsburg is such a hot, trendy place for people, because if you work in Manhattan, it's super easy to get there. You can take the car over the bridge, but why would you put yourself through this traffic if you don't have to? Therefore, you can take the subway, the L train, one stop, and you are in Manhattan. You can take the ferry across the river, or you can bike or walk across Williamsburg Bridge. Hence, the connection with Manhattan is super easy. You have 2 lanes for cars going one way and the other. Subway is going through the middle, the J, M, and Z lines. On the other side is a path for bikes, and on this side is a path for pedestrians. Once you get to the Manhattan side, the bike and the pedestrian paths merge together into one. Another thing that I noticed is just a little bit how weird it felt. Now, you do not really feel this unless you stop and you really look around and focus like I did, for example. But right there, in many places there is enough gaps to see the water below and give you a sense that you are very high up. Now, that's true with all the bridges, but I think that if you walk across, let's say, the Brooklyn Bridge, for example, there is always so many people there, and the path is in the middle of the bridge, so that it sort of makes you forget, or at least you don't really think about how high you are up. But here, it is a little bit of a different feel to it. In addition, whenever the subway goes through, it creates a lot of vibration. Here, the subway was going through and I put my camera and hand down on the railing just to show you the vibrations. Therefore, anyone afraid of heights, it might give you a bit of a weird feeling, but it's not that bad. It's just enough for this to be an exciting and fun adventure. You also have great views from the bridge, although not the same as Brooklyn Bridge, for example, because you do have this metal fence, this mesh, which really does not obstruct your view. It's not a big deal. However, it does create an issue for the camera as the lens tries to focus in and out, and hence I cannot really show you clearly the views you have from the bridge, but it's definitely worth your walk. And here we are on the other side, in Manhattan, and so you see it's not that crowded. There is one thing which I really do not like about this bridge. Now, agree with me or not, but the graffiti. It's everywhere. And it's as if the city just gave up on this and accepted that, well, it is what it is now. But me personally, I really find this annoying. Number one, it really takes away from the beauty of this structure. Instead of enjoying this fine piece of engineering, you are welcomed by all of this, well, crap. And if you are new to New York or you're walking through the bridge the first time, you might get a feeling of this being run down place and maybe even make you uneasy inside, but that is certainly not the case. However, I never understood this because, well, how dare somebody do this to other people's property? It's just so disrespectful, in my view at least. Here you have the plaque to the bridge of information of when it opened and so on, and you cannot even read it. This is something which I actually do not like about the city, and I will explain my line of thinking behind this in the future. But the graffiti is everywhere, so much so that at one point it spills to the roofs of the adjacent buildings. Mostly it's meaningless, but once in a while you get an interesting one, like here. Well, buddy, somebody wants you out of the building. And then there is this priceless piece of work. Dude, get a roofer ASAP, otherwise there will be nothing left of that building. Walking on the waterfront is beautiful. I love how they designed the parks. It's a mix of old and new, gorgeous new parks and paths along which they incorporated many things that used to stand here, just like in Red Hook with the cranes like I showed in my earlier video. I think it looks great. You have some cranes, some older beams, this is a playground for kids, for example, which is pretty unique, and I really think it fits into the overall design of the location. This is the old sugar refinery building. As you see, they are building a completely new and modern structure on the inside, but leaving the outer walls and preserving the old structure, which is interesting. This sugar business began in 1807 in Lower Manhattan, and as the company grew, they expanded into Brooklyn. And in the 1880s, this building was built. And you can pretty much walk along the waterfront parks all the way to Greenpoint. Although in few places there are still areas which the parks are not continuous and the land is not yet developed, but that is changing very quickly. This small little section is called the Grand Ferry Park. And before Williamsburg Bridge opened, ferries would be running between Grand Streets in Brooklyn, so here, and the Grand Street in Manhattan about every 5 minutes. Once the bridge opened, the need for these ferries became a lot less, and slowly over time it died out. This is a smokestack from a former molasses or sweetener processing plant, so again leaving and incorporating the past into these modern designs. Pretty cool. You have a small little beach with great views of Manhattan. And even for the kids, there are some nice and unique designs like this choo-choo train here. I know it's not a big deal, but generally you do not see things like this on playgrounds in New York City. So it's nice to see it here. There's also a soccer field nearby. Once you make your way into Greenpoint, it's basically a continuation of Williamsburg, really, with few places which keep the memory of the past, like this water tower here, or these buildings. However, they are becoming few in between as more and more they are being knocked down or at least renovated and repurposed. Here on the other side is Long Island City in Queens, a video I made a while back. I hope you enjoyed this trip with me along the waterfront and you come back, as shortly I will be uploading few shorter videos, one of which will feature Greenpoint once again. So stay safe out there, but also adventurous, and I will see you shortly.